Okay, we're going to go ahead and begin today's meeting, and I think the very first thing I will do is have a roll call since we do have a quorum.
Brownlee?
Here.
Brownlee here, Stanby. Amiano? Here. Amiano here, Arambula. Carter? Ing? Here. Ing here, Miller. Norby? Here. Norby here, Torlakson? Torlakson here.
Great, thank you. We have 10 items on our agenda today. All of the bills, of course, are non-fiscal, and we have 2 items on our consent calendar, AB 1742 and AB 2694. So we'll have 8 bills presented today. This is our last opportunity today to hear bills before the policy committee deadline, and I just wanted to thank all of the members of the committee and particularly to my staff who has been working very hard and very long hours over the last few weeks. So a lot of gratitude to them, and thank you to all who have come and testified over the last few months in making these hearings go very, very smoothly. This month we're planning to hold 2 oversight hearings. The first will be on May the 12th, where we will hear about problems that have arisen during the implementation of CalPADS and what the Department of Education is doing to resolve those problems. And the second oversight hearing is planned for May 19th and will examine issues related to school facilities. And so we will be providing members with more information on that. And without any further comments, we will begin. And our first bill is AB 2370 by Mr. Hernandez. Item 6. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity to present this bill. I want to begin by saying that I appreciate and will accept the committee's recommended amendments outlined in the analysis. Great amendments to the bill. Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill, AB 2370, addresses current deficiencies. Thank you very much. In the District of Choice program by guaranteeing priority for attendance to the most vulnerable students. The group includes English learners, students who qualify for free and reduced price meals, and finally pupils with special needs. The goal is accomplished by requiring the District of Choice to ensure that a student who transfers into the district is in fact enrolling in the school with higher API scores than the school in which the pupil was previously enrolled. And with me also are here individuals from the Roland Unified School District that would like to speak in support of the bill, and I have some other individuals who like to speak in support of the bill, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Hidalgo. I'm with Roland Unified School District. I'm a school board member, and I'm here to offer my support for the amendments to the District of Choice that's presented in AB 2370. Initially had some reservations about the District of Choice, but I think these amendments help to clarify some of my concerns, and we feel that the District of Choice, the intent of it was really to allow students, struggling students who are the highest needs, who have the most needs, special education students and English learners and free and reduced lunch students to be able to have just the same amount of opportunities that other kids have when moving from one school district to another. So Roland Unified School District is in support of AB 2370.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Hello, Terry Burns on behalf of Pomona Unified School District, and we are very much in support of this measure. It clarifies a number of issues on oversight that were missing from the original proposal on District of Choice. We do appreciate that. It makes sure that the students are really the ones benefiting, that they're going to schools that have higher quality, higher direction for them. We appreciate that, and the fiscal oversight provisions that are clear with the county office. In support.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. Liz Guillen with Public Advocates. Most of the parents that we work with would like to have the choice of an excellent school within their neighborhood. But not being able to have that, any choice program that is meaningful has to be one that is accessible. And as you know, we have opposed in the past district of choice program because we did not feel it was accessible, especially to the students that are struggling the most. We appreciate Assemblymember Hernandez's goal of making that access real and including more safeguards for the access. And we agree very much with the recommended amendments by committee staff. So we thank staff for that, and we thank Mr. Hernandez for making districts of choice better, and we urge your aye vote.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Barrett Snyder on behalf of the Franklin McKinley School District in San Jose. We had significant concerns with District of Choice when it was passed last year. This bill does a great job of protecting the most vulnerable students in this process, and we urge you to support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff Freitas with the California Federation of Teachers, and for all the reasons that were previously stated, we support this bill.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Witnesses in support?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bill Ring with Transparent would support this bill with the caveat that if we did a better job of explaining how parents and families can be involved in school improvement in our local schools and did a better job of welcoming them, we wouldn't be so anxious to transfer out of our home districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Other witnesses in support?
Sorry, it took me
That's all right.
a little later. Martha Zaragoza Diaz, representing Californians Together Coalition, and with these amendments, we support the bill for the reasons that have been previously given by the other testifiers. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? The bill's been moved. Is there a second? A second by Mr. Ng. Questions? Mr. Arambula.
Just a comment, Madam Chair. The first time this bill came to us, Mr. Hernandez, I had some concerns, and I think those concerns have been allayed, so I will be supporting it. I do just want to take a moment to reiterate what the previous witness said, that if we did a better job, there wouldn't be a need for this, for a district of choice. And my concern previously had been centered around providing alternatives to parents who feel that their neighborhood schools are not providing their children a way to improve themselves. So I will support it today, but I also think that as we go forward, we need to do a better job of improving all schools. Until we do that, I think parents deserve a right to look elsewhere, and I think your bill on balance is easy to support because of the amendments you've taken and the protections and the thought that you've put into it. So in summary, I will be supporting it, but I do hope that we spend more time figuring out how to improve schools so that parents don't feel they need to look elsewhere.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from members? Seeing none, there's a motion and a second, and the motion is due pass as amended, and if you'd like to close.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to just kind of dovetail what my colleague, Assemblymember Arambula, just said as far as an alternative to parents. And as you know, I was adamantly opposed to the District of Choice bill when it came through in front of the legislature last year. And the reason why I was opposed to it is exactly this reason, that I felt it disenfranchised the most vulnerable kids in our community, but more in particular the kids in the community of the Roland Unified School District. They were opposed at the time, and it was that school district that brought to my attention that a neighboring district that purposely went after only the brightest, the A students, and in my opinion were cherry picking and leaving out the kids that need it the most, the English language learners, the kids with disabilities, the individuals who don't have the ability to be able to get a bus or transportation to these better schools. I agree that we should have choice, but that choice should be for every kid. And to me, I think this addresses this by allowing those individuals who don't have a voice to be able to get a higher priority and be able to go into a better school district. And for that, I respectfully ask for your aye vote, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. And I just want to say, too, that I think this is a very good bill. And I think, in all of this discussion around district of choice, the one thing that we haven't had is data to know what the real outcomes are. We still don't have the data, but I think this bill certainly helps to ensure what the original intention of District of Choice bill was, and that was to be able to provide for children, particularly children of high need, access to a high-quality education if they were not able, if that was not being delivered to them in their home school. So I appreciate you bringing that forward, and with that, I'll ask the Secretary to call the roll.
Brownlee.
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Nastandi. Amiano. Aye. Amiano, aye. Arambula. Aye. Arambula, aye. Carter. Ing. Aye. Ing, aye. Miller. Norby. No. Norby, no. Torlakson. Aye. Torlakson, aye. It has 5 votes.
5 votes. Your bill is out.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members.
Thank you. Our next bill is AB 1775 by Mr. Furutani. It's item number 3 in your agenda. Yes, I did. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. The bill you have before you was the bill related to looking at permits for families and to stabilize the education for the students in different communities. What this establishes is it provides a permanent permit once you get it okayed by the receiving district and the sending district for any student.
Excuse me, Mr. Furutani.
Yes, ma'am.
I made an announcement that you were going to be presenting AB 1775.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And you're indeed presenting AB 2444. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page, you are presenting AB 2444.
Yes.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you.
With that clarification, I'll move the bill.
And then I'll just urge an aye vote if that's the case. We are gladly accepting and we appreciate the amendments from the committee. Appreciate the help in terms of this special bill for us. And I also have people here to testify from the City of Lakewood that's the sponsor of the bill as well.
Thank you.
Madam Chair and members, Jason Gonsalves, representing the City of Lakewood. I have with me Councilmember Steve Croft to make some very brief remarks. Thank you.
Good day. Happy to be here today and would like to thank Assemblyman Furutani for his leadership on this legislation and for the committee's willingness to respond to this issue. This bill secures educational stability for students enrolled under an interdistrict transfer and gives parents the confidence that once they make arrangements, they'll have these year after year and not have to kind of be a crapshoot every year as they go forward. So we are in full support of the bill and ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much. The bill has been moved by Mr. Arambula and seconded by Mr. Amiano. Questions, comments from members? Wait a minute. I forgot to ask for any other witnesses in support of the bill.
Adonai Mack with the Association of California School Administrators. We're going to take a supportive amended position on the bill. Our concerns are actually addressed in the committee analysis. One other issue I thought that I would like to bring up is our members would like to. They like the fact that there's a consistent contact with the district of residence throughout the year. We would ask that there's some consideration as the bill moves forward of looking at how to make sure that there's a consistent connection between the districts of residence and the district of choice in this reference, so that there's a constant communication with both of the districts to ensure that the student is performing adequately in the school, there's no disciplinary problems, and that there's a regular communication between the districts. And that's the one thing that we just want to check as the bill moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bill Ring with Transparent. We take a support position on this bill. Would just like to point out that my comments that I made earlier also apply here. We just need to do a better job. A lot of our parents who are electing to take advantage of an interdistrict permit are doing so because the adjacent school district offers programs, immersion programs, language immersion and others, that the host home district does not. If we're really going to take seriously the idea of building community and giving schools control over their budgets and decision making, we have to let communities make decisions for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? See none. Questions or comments from members? There's been a motion and a second. Mr. Furutani, would you like to close?
Just respectfully ask for an aye vote, and thank you for the amendments.
Thank you. And the motion is due pass as amended. And Secretary, please call the roll.
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Nastandi? Amiano? Aye. Amiano, aye. Arambula? Aye. Arambula, aye. Carter? Ing? Ing, aye. Miller? Norby? Aye. Norby, aye. Torlakson? Aye. Torlakson, aye. 6 votes.
6 votes. Your bill is out.
Thank you very much.
And now you will be presenting AB 1775.
Thank you.
It's item 3 on the agenda.
Thank you. We're having a little trouble getting on the right page ourselves. Thank you very much, members of the committee. That bill and this bill are very important to our districts, but this bill in particular, AB 1775, is a very unique bill. It's called the Fred Korematsu Civil Liberties and Constitution Day, and it's reference to a key case during beginning of World War II when Executive Order 9066 was established. Several Japanese Americans, for different reasons, decided that as American citizens they had rights that were being violated by this particular executive order. No one could deny the context in which the executive order was coming about, that being the beginning of the war. But as American citizens, several individuals decided to stand up for their civil liberties, and they used as their argument the Constitution of the United States. One of these individuals was Fred Korematsu. Fred Korematsu, along with Gordon Hirabayashi, Memori Yasui, and later Mitsui Endo, challenged the constitutionality of Executive Order 9066. This took place in 1942, and Mr. Korematsu himself, as an individual, stood up against all the powers that be, as it were, to take on this issue. He went to court and lost. He appealed, went to the appeal court and lost, and then he was incarcerated in America's concentration camps during World War II. More of his personal history will be shared by his daughter, who is with us today. But in 1982-83, Fred Korematsu, clearly unsatisfied with the situation that he had lived his life with relative to this situation, decided to once again challenge the constitutionality of Executive Order 9066. The uniqueness of the case was he was able to bring to bear legal scholars and other individuals that were resources in research, like my mother-in-law, who happened to work on this case, but a group of young attorneys that were Japanese American that formed legal teams for Quorum Nobis case, representatives Fred Korematsu, Min Yasui, and also Gordon Hirabayashi. In the case for Mr. Korematsu, he took it to court and was able to prevail, and the Quorum Nobis now is a part of every study outline in law school. And as you talk about Brown versus the Board of Education, as you talk about other landmark issues, you as a law student, and now we hope as history students, will learn about Fred Korematsu, what he stood for in the Quorum Nobis case and its impact on the Constitution. In 1994, the decision by the Supreme Court of 1942 was vacated, and as a result of that, all three were determined to be free from that particular problem and situation legally. I have others here to testify, along with my great colleague, who herself has a personal relationship to this case because of her husband was one of those young, he was quite young back then, Barry, attorneys that took on the Quorum Nobis cases. So if I could introduce someone you all know, Assemblywoman Mary Hayashi.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I'm just here to support the bill as a co-author. Very proud to be co-author of the bill, and Mr. Fred Korematsu passed away about 5 years ago, a longtime resident of San Leandro, a city that I represent now in the 18th Assembly District. I think most of the family grew up in the 18th Assembly District. I urge your support of the bill. Thank you.
But you need to clarify, Mary, that your husband, Judge Dennis Hayashi, was a part of the legal teams that helped with the Quorum Nobis case.
Very good. Thank you. Next witness.
Members, this is Karen Korematsu, daughter of Fred Korematsu.
Thank you. It's a privilege for us to have you here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. First of all, on behalf of my family, I'd like to thank Assemblymember Warren Furutani for introducing ABF 1775, and also to thank Assemblymember Mary Hayashi and Marty Block for co-sponsoring the bill. Obviously, there's a personal connection there. First of all, I wanted just to share with you, if you allow me, some values that my father had. My father was not the type of person who sought awards or honors for himself. Over 40 years, my father was always looking for justice. He really believed deep down inside that he was right and the government was wrong to incarcerate the Japanese Americans. So when he had the opportunity to have his case reopened in 1983, he did so not just for himself or the Japanese Americans, but for all Americans, so something like this would never happen again. In fact, I didn't even learn until that time that my father was always worried about my brother and I, because he didn't know whether or not we were really American citizens. You know, what did that mean? And he was always afraid that if something did happen, especially with the Japanese government, that could this happen all over again? After my father's Quorum Nobis case, and I would also like to mention for the record that this wonderful legal team worked on this case pro bono. They had day jobs, but they also, found a way to bring about justice. And so after my father's case was overturned, he could have very well just sat back and said, okay, I no longer have a record and now I can be a private citizen. But in his heart, he knew that he had to do something more. Education has always been very important to him. And he crisscrossed the United States talking to different schools and organizations to tell his story and to teach them about history. And also, he knew that unless you remind people of our history, that you can be doomed to make the same mistakes again. He also took up the challenge of the Japanese American Reparations and Redress bill and lobbied in Washington, D.C. And fortunately, in 1988, President Reagan signed that bill that gave the apology to the Japanese Americans. For his work in continuing to educate, in 1998, my father received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Clinton. And he said at the time he didn't do this just for himself, but he did this for all Japanese Americans that were incarcerated. And also, in that same year, the California State Senate awarded him the first Senate medal. And that was presented to him by then Senator Bill Lockyer. Since my father's passing, there's been 3 schools named after him. And so that, to me, says a lot about how much he's really thought of, especially in the world of education. And the first one is actually in Mace Ranch in Davis. It's the Fred T. Korematsu Elementary School in Mace Ranch. And I stopped there on the way up just to visit with the principal and the teachers there. And they were really quite excited about the prospect of having a special day focused on studying about civil liberties and the Constitution in regard to the Japanese American internment and the work my father did. And also they were thrilled that it would be on his birthday because as they pointed out, and something I really hadn't thought about, children, really kind of identify special days with birthdays. To them, that's always a special day for them. So they were very excited at this prospect. So, my father is a positive role model, I think, for all, and I think it's befitting to create this day, and as a demonstration that one man can make a difference, and the future of our country is going to be to the students of today and tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Good afternoon, Assembly members. I'm Ling Wu Liu, and I'm here with the Fred Korematsu Institute for Civil Rights and Education at the Asian Law Caucus. I'm here in support of the bill. Fred Korematsu's story is not limited to the Japanese American experience. It's not limited to World War II history or to constitutional law classes. It represents something much bigger. More than half a century after his wrongful conviction, Korematsu continued to speak out. In 2003 and 2004, he filed friend of the court petitions with the Supreme Court on behalf of Muslim inmates being held in U.S. military prisons, warning that the government's extreme measures were reminiscent of the past. Today, Arab, Middle Eastern, Muslim, and South Asian communities have become the victims of discriminatory national security policies, which have fanned the flames of racism. In communities, more people have begun to see their neighbors as enemies. Just 4 days after 9/11, Balbir Singh Sodhi, a Sikh American gas station owner in Arizona, was murdered by a man who thought that Sodhi's turban somehow made him guilty of carrying out 9/11. Fred Korematsu's case is a reminder that we cannot let national security policies be used as a justification for violating civil rights. It's a reminder that communities targeted after 9/11 have support from those who have been scapegoated in the past. It's a reminder that the government and the highest court have failed to protect us in the past, but that we have made great efforts to correct those mistakes, and we cannot afford to backslide on those efforts. Despite receiving honors such as the Presidential Medal of Freedom, Korematsu's story is still largely unknown among the general public. Just in February, the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. opened a civil rights exhibition. Included in that exhibition are African American, Latino, and Native American heroes, as well as women's rights advocates and disabled rights advocates. To date, not one Asian American has been included in the collection. Unlike Dr. Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and Cesar Chavez, Fred Korematsu has too often been overlooked as one of the nation's most important civil rights heroes. That is one of the realities we're trying to change at the Korematsu Institute for Civil Rights and Education. Our mission is to advance pan-ethnic civil rights in a post-9/11 context through education, leadership development, and activism. Fred Korematsu Day would help this mission tremendously, as it would give us a pathway to reach K-12 students across the state and teach them about one of California's most important native sons. Today we have the opportunity to recognize Fred Korematsu and everything that he represents. Thank you for considering this bill.
Thank you. Other witnesses in support, and I apologize, but we've extended the time in terms of testimony. So if you'll just state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair. Ignacio Hernandez on behalf of the California Attorneys for Criminal Justice. We're in support of the bill.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Bill has been moved. Is there a second? Mr. Ng is seconding the bill and would like to speak.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I, too, have a personal connection generally with this case. I completed law school at UCLA, one of the top 10 law schools in the nation. And after going through that law school and not reading a single civil rights case about Asian Americans and the law, even though on my own discovered many, including the case in San Francisco, where an individual was not allowed to testify in a murder trial because in those days Asian Americans had the same status as animals. They had no legal status in court, and the defendant who had murdered someone in cold blood went free. So I started the nation's first course on Asian Americans and the law. And the Korematsu case was, of course, had not yet developed, but many others had. And so therefore, I believe that this is timely, and I wish that the jurisdiction of the bill could also extend to law schools so that those very individuals that are committed to advocating fairness and justice and civil liberties could be required to read about these cases. But unfortunately, maybe that's for another day. And I would finally like to conclude by asking if I could be added as a co-author, if I'm not already, or at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ng. Mr. Arambula.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Furatani, I too would request that you consider adding me as a co-author. And I'd like to just briefly explain my reason for supporting your bill. Some years ago, when I was on the school board in Fresno, we did something to honor all of the individuals that had been wrongfully pulled out of high school and taken to internment camps. So what we did was we gave them an honorary graduation along with a diploma and a nice ceremony. And there was one lady who came forward and spoke at the event, and she said, she related a story where her granddaughter had asked her, Grandma, when did you start high school? And she told her. And Grandma, 50 years later, you're now graduating? You're not very smart, are you, Grandma? And I think what has happened is many individuals were not willing or did not feel comfortable coming out and describing their experiences. And she began to realize that it was a mistake not to have educated her granddaughter about the events. And I suspect that all of us would benefit from learning more about this individual who one person can make a big difference. One person can stand up to wrong and prevail. And I think that deserves to be shared with all students who come from the four corners of the world and speak, at least in our district, over 100 languages and dialects. And I think it'd be a good lesson, not only for Japanese American children, but for all children. So I'm very pleased to support your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Arambula. Mr. Amiano.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Arambula, too, for your eloquence. And I do find this all very touching as well. It's quite a privilege to share this with you. I heard this morning from a longtime friend of mine, Kiku Funabiki. She just was thrilled. She's in her late 80s, and I did work with her on a similar issue on my school board where we introduced a curriculum. To me, this is really an example of why the ordinary is the extraordinary. Without any rank, without any privilege, without any trappings of electoral office, your dad, Mr. Crump, did make a difference, and I can't say that I like it, but I am impressed by the fact that he tried more than once, and then he tried twice, and then he tried the third time. And I mean, that really speaks to a commitment that is in some ways larger than the very unfortunate experiences that Japanese Americans experienced here during World War II. And can it happen again? I'm afraid so. And if we look at what's happening in Arizona and all the issues in and around immigration, it is a very frightening reminder. So I find that this is extremely appropriate, and I really applaud you for bringing this forward to this committee. It's an honor to be supportive of it.
Thank you, Mr. Norby.
Madam Chair, both AB 1775 and 2412 relate to naming days of significance after specific people. And the problem that I have with both of them, and the reason that I will not support either one of them, either for Mr. Korematsu or for Ronald Reagan, is a couple of things. Number one, whatever we say or do regarding these will, I'm confident, have really absolutely no effect on how teachers are teaching history. I know I taught history in high school for about 20 years. We got these proclamations down. They were widely ignored, and the more you have them, the more they're ignored. This man's contribution to history, like President Reagan, I can address that later, but my comments are similar, is obvious, and teachers are going to teach about it regardless of what we say, what we do or say here. And the more that these are proliferated, the less value they'll have. And I do see a proliferation of these year by year. There have been a lot of them just since I've been in the Assembly for the last 3 months, whether they're of individual people or proclamations, day of, week of. And I find them, well, I don't question the motive of my good friend, Mr. Furatami. I do think that they're somewhat self-congratulatory for us to think that this is really going to affect the way that things are taught. The Japanese relocation, just like Ronald Reagan's presidency, are a part of the history curriculum. They're a part of it. They'll continue to be a part of it. As a history teacher, I taught all this, and I don't think naming days after people is going to really have that much effect one way or the other on it. So mine is nothing against Mr. Korematsu personally or the people supporting this, but just a policy that I personally have of not supporting these. I don't think I'll vote no, but when I don't vote yes, that's why, and that applies to these two and all of them that come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Norby. Ms. Carter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Furatani, I'm honored to be here today while you're bringing your bill forward, and I too would like to be added as a co-author, and I'd like to say that I'm really proud that you are bringing this forth so students will not have to make an effort to learn about the history of all of Americans. I remember when I was in college and having to dig through and search out the history of a lot of African Americans, and my father and my relatives always told me that we had a great history, but we were always a footnote in someone else's history. And so for that reason, I want to tell you how happy I am that you're doing this, because students from here on will have an opportunity to hear about it, read about it, all at the same time. They won't have to make that extra effort to find out about people who look like them and people who are not in the mainstream, what they did to build this great country that we have. I'm proud to be American. I'm proud to be an African American, and I'm really excited about the fact that you brought this bill forward, and I hope you allow me to be a co-author on your bill.
Absolutely, Ms. Carter.
Thank you, and I too would like to be added on as a co-author and hope very much that this small recognition can help to reverse so many of the past injustices that have taken place. So with that, I'd ask you, Mr. Furatani, if you'd like to close. Before you do, I forgot that I needed to just clarify a couple of technical amendments to the bill, and the first one that I believe you agreed to in your opening comments is a technical amendment to restructure the provisions of the Ed Code dealing with a special significance to avoid future technical conflicts with other bills that might come up in terms of the special significance, so that one doesn't oversee the other.
Absolutely.
And the second one is the amendments to clarify factual information presented in the findings and declarations. So with that, the motion is do pass as amended, and if you'd like to close.
Just very briefly, I want to thank the committee in total for your support. Before the meeting, I had a chance to meet with the Republican policy staff about this particular issue. When one of them sat down, he said, "Don't worry, Mr. Furatani, we don't bite." Definitely did not. We had a great discussion on civil liberties in the Constitution. They really added much to what we were trying to do, and clearly shows us this is not a partisan issue, bipartisan. And Mr. Norby, you have shown clearly at your work on this committee in particular. I've heard you talk about your experience.
Only your fundraisers.
I appreciate you. You didn't have to dance the hula last night, but that was fine. That you've shown as a teacher, you use whatever teaching moments to explain to students the relevance of what is going on around any particular issue, and I appreciate this. I don't expect anybody to start having constant reference to these particular days, but it is an opportunity to talk about a teaching moment. And I think Mr. Amiano put it well relative to what ordinary people do in extraordinary ways. And that best fits so many of the people that we honor. And we all know that those that the named after them really are nearly a footnote. What you talk about is the other people that they were affected by, that affected them. We had another person that was going to testify today from the ACLU because the American Civil Liberties Union stepped forward to represent Mr. Korematsu in 1942 because they believed the principle that he was standing up for was worth fighting for. So we respectfully ask for an aye vote and appreciate all the comments from my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing the bill forward, and thank you for the privilege for all of us to have you here. And with that, I'll ask the Secretary to call the roll.
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Nastandy?
Aye.
Nastandy, aye. Amiano? Aye. Amiano, aye. Arambula? Arambula, aye. Carter? Carter, aye. Ing? Ing, aye. Miller? Norby? Norby not voting. Torlakson? Aye. Torlakson, aye. It's got 7 votes.
7 votes, your bill is out.
Thank you very much, members.
Thank you. And now we move to AB 2412 by Mr. Tran, item 7 in the agenda. Yeah. Welcome. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members. I'm going to keep my testimony short since there's already discussion on my bill and even a vote on it. But definitely this bill follows the previous bill, but there are some different distinctions if I may proceed. I would first like to begin by accepting the amendments detailed in the committee analysis as author's amendment. In June 2009, President Barack Obama signed into law the Ronald Reagan Centennial Commission Act, which establishes the commission to plan activities making the upcoming 100th anniversary of President Ronald Reagan's birth on February 6, 1911. AB 2412 will establish the Ronald Reagan Day on February 6 of each year. The bill encourages schools and educational institutions to take appropriate steps to educate and celebrate Reagan's contributions to our communities, our state, our nation, and our nation on February 6. This bill simply adds one additional day to the existing 4 days, only 4 days so far, of celebration in current law. AB 2412 will promote greater knowledge and understanding of the contributions that President Reagan made to our nation, and most significantly to our California communities. In keeping with the bipartisan spirit already shown at the federal level and in the U.S. Congress, I respectfully ask for your aye vote on AB 2412. Thank you.
Thank you. Witnesses in support.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Ben Lopez from Traditional Values Coalition. We are the sponsors of the bill. Mr. Tran just went over a few of the points I was going to convey. Let me remind everybody that it was a very bipartisan vote from Congress and a Democratic president that did sign into law the Ronald Reagan Centennial Commission Act that calls for commemorations of Ronald Reagan next year, February 6, 2011. We feel it only appropriate, at the very least, being the home state of the former president, former governor, and the list goes on and on of all his titles, that we have February 6 of each year commemorated throughout the state. And bear in mind that the schools are given the option of participating in this day. They're not obligated to. The bill does not have any appropriations of funds for the day, so it takes care of that concern. That's not going to drain any resources from anybody's budgets. But really, you know, we would have thought that a man like Ronald Reagan, who was governor of this state, went on to be president and is perhaps California's most successful political figure. Others would say Nixon would be on par, but Nixon resigned from office. Reagan didn't. Reagan survived. And so I would say and argue that he is the most successful son of this state, if you will. The fact that he isn't already studied in classrooms, I think, is kind of a shame. And this just put this on record, puts it on the books, gives schools the options. Just a little bit of tidbits about the former president. He was the first president to preside over an Olympic Games held in the United States in 1984. He was the first president to have died in the 21st century. His is the first official state funeral since President Johnson's. He's only 2 American presidents to have received the honor of the British knighthood. He received the Medal of Honor. He's the second longest living president in U.S. history. Of course, he has stamps, he has buildings, he has airports, you name it, named after him, but yet this state fails officially to recognize him. The legislature every year since, I believe it's 2002, 2003, has introduced resolutions to honor the man, and I think that is commendable, but now I think it's due time that we recognize him in law. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Is there a motion?
Move the bill.
Moved by
Moved
by Mr. Nasande, seconded by Mr. Norby. Are there questions or comments? Mr. Norby.
I made comments earlier regarding the bill, and I won't be supporting it because of the same reasons that I didn't support the previous bill. And likewise, I presume everyone else will be supporting it for the same reason they supported the previous bill, but that's up to them. Ronald Reagan is already part of the statewide curriculum, and when you said that it's a shame that he isn't studied already, he is studied, believe me. You may have misspoken there.
A day, though. It's a day to commemorate.
Another problem with these days, Madam Chair, I'd like to point out is that teachers teach this in a chronological order. February 6th, if you're teaching the whole of U.S. history, you're probably getting into World War II if you're on schedule, and you're probably in the Civil War if you're not. And so to pick out a day that doesn't correspond when the person is actually occurring in history is almost a disservice. Then you've got to kind of pull them out and say, well, this is Reagan Day and we're going to study him later. So I don't think it'll have any effect on how he studied. And I'm just anticipating as to what may be requested of me. 2013 is the 100th birthday of Nixon's birth. He was born in my district. The only president to be born in this state, and I presume there'll be requests that I take up similar bills like this for the 100th birthday of President Nixon. But I'll have to tell them, if I'm still in office then, that I don't do this, and I think that the schools named after Nixon, of which there are several, and the Nixon Library and Museum in Yorba Linda are perfectly capable of doing this without creating a Nixon commission. And more commissions are things that conservatives generally don't want. And what is and isn't a conservative, I guess we could debate on either side. So I won't be supporting it for that reason, not out of any disrespect, but in a way because I think doing this is a form of patronizing and acting like we're having an effect on education that is either already there, or if it's not, these aren't going to help. So I'll be a no vote.
Madam Chair, members, if I may expand on the issue a little bit in response.
Please
Thank
proceed.
you. This bill is personal to me in the sense that I got, and I'd like to expand the issue a little bit further than just one day or designating one day as Ronald Reagan Day or any other days. I got involved in public service and politics when I grew up during the second term of President Reagan while he was in the White House. I was considered a Reagan kid when I went to Washington, D.C. and did an internship in Congress, because during that time the president was very inspiring for young students like myself who read about him, who learned about him and his policies in the White House back in the mid-1980s. Indeed, our great nation, and specifically our state, we have issues over the past 200 years. Parts of the history is not so good, as we've heard with the previous bill, and we are great enough to correct them. And we are great enough to admit fault with our history and clear that history and honor someone who deserves honoring. Now, if on the one hand, if we have issues, negatives, like that, and we are able to correct that, I think our state and our country is much greater and much better than everything else. And the President of the United States specifically, with this President, in my opinion, humble opinion, gave hope and opportunity, something that is very positive of our country. And he talks about liberty and personifies freedom as well. So I think we should be able to take, as a country as well as a state, both the good and the bad as part of our history, collective history as a people. So it's more than just one day, Mr. Norby. It's about principles and values of what this person personify. And whether the teacher or the school teaches on this day about President Reagan or not, I just hope, and I sure am hoping that all of you will also hope that our students, our second and third generations who are going through our education system, will learn about historical figures, great leaders of our country, in a very positive way. And it's also important, and this is something that we take for granted because we work in this building day in and day out, 4 or 5 days a week. But it's also important, I think, that through this deliberative process, through this democratic process, that we as elected representatives, both in the Senate and in the Assembly, with the concurrence of the governor, if he agrees, to put a stamp and officially recognize a great person like President Reagan, regardless of our political philosophies, whether we agree or disagree with his policies or not. But for one day at least, we should look at the positive contributions of this man, as we've also considered other 2 days for 2 other individuals, as well as issues and organizations that we designated for the state.
Thank you, Mr. Tran. Any other comments, Mr. Arambula?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Tran, Ronald Reagan was not my favorite governor. Probably Earl Warren, who went on to be Chief Justice. But like you, he, and perhaps for different reasons, but he was partly responsible for my political awakening. Perhaps from the other side of the political spectrum.
Welcome to California.
But I think fair is fair. I think that he does deserve recognition. I do believe that he made significant contributions to our history, and so I will be supporting your bill today.
Any other comments? Mr. Amiano?
Yes. Mr. Tran, I have deep respect for you and your life experiences, and I think Mr. Arambula has addressed the fact that, you know, I look at different periods through a different prism for many reasons. I think you've been sincere. I recognize that, and I think Mr. Reagan's presidency no doubt influenced you in a positive way. And with all due respect, I can't say that I feel that strongly about your witness, because I have heard that organization demean, diminish, malign, and demonize my peers in the LGBT community. But it's bigger than that as well. I feel that Mr. Reagan has been recognized, will continue to be recognized, and perhaps even memorialized with a statue. I understand there's a movement to do that here on the Capitol grounds. But until we have a level playing field, until we look at people like Mr. Korematsu, who did not have the wherewithal, but still has made an imprint on history, and in my prism, in my characterization of his life, a more significant one. Out of respect to you, I won't vote no, but I am going to stay off this bill, and I do wish you luck. I think you're a gentleman.
Any other comments? I just want to say as well, I agree with many of the points that Mr. Amiano made and have great respect for you as a legislator, and we'll be staying off of this particular bill, and not for political partisan reasons, but purely for the fact that I want to reserve this kind of recognition for the people who will not be recognized in history the way we would like to see them. And I believe that Ronald Reagan, because he was the governor of California and a two-term president of the United States, has a very significant role in our history and will be studied. And I think the other people who have been put in this position, and only very few, as you mentioned, are people who perhaps don't get recognized, or the curriculum is not talking about their place in history. And with that, I will be staying off of the bill. There is a motion and a second, and the motion is do pass as amended. And Mr. Tran, if you'd like to close.
Again, I just wanted to very briefly say that it's just more than a day. Basically, when we recognize a person or an object or a thing, and than we did for other folks, it symbolizes something great about our country. Even drawing from experience, negative experience, historical experience, as in the Korematsu case, for example, which I've also read in law school. I think all law schools in their con law classes are required to read that now. We can also take individuals or historical events and make a positive thing out of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary, please call the roll.
Brownlee?
Not voting.
Brownlee not voting. Nastandy? Aye. Nastandy, aye. Amiano? Amiano not voting. Arambula? Arambula, aye. Carter? Carter, aye. Ing? Miller? Norby? Norby not voting. Torlakson? Torlakson, aye. It has 4 votes.
4 votes. You need 1 more vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll keep the roll open. So now that brings us to committee member bills. Mr. Torlakson has 2 bills and Mr. Amiano has 2 bills. Do you guys want to arm wrestle for who goes first? Yeah. All right. Mr. Amiano, item 4, AB 1854.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members, for this opportunity. First, let me clarify that I'll be taking all the committee amendments, and thank you to the Chair and committee staff for working with me. AB 1884 seeks to improve access to education by clarifying the specific documents that constitute evidence of residency for students in all school districts. Existing law only specifies a range of documents that can be used to meet residency requirements for school attendance within a school district adjacent to the international border. Therefore, all school districts are not provided with a definition of school district residency or specific guidelines on how to verify residency. The bill provides clear guidelines to all districts by identifying specific documents which include property tax payment receipts, rent contracts, leases, or payment receipts, utility service contract statements or payment receipts, pay stubs, voter registration, correspondence from a government agency, declaration of residency executed by the parent or guardian in the context of homelessness as defined in the McKinley-Vento Act as proof of residency for school attendance. AB 1854 seeks to eliminate discriminatory barriers that may prevent students from having equal access to education. Families that may experience difficulty in providing documents to establish residency within a school district can include victims of domestic violence, immigrant and low-wage workers, and the homeless. Here with me today is Marta Zaragoza Diaz with Californians Together and other witnesses from the CFT.
It just didn't seem to be right that someone wasn't screaming, "Move the bill!" So please proceed.
Good afternoon. Martha Zaragoza Diaz, representing Californians Together Coalition. We strongly support the bill. We have been contacted by some of our members within our organization with regards to the fact that they have received calls from parents questioning some of the documentation that they were being requested to submit to the school district with regards to verifying residency so that they could enroll their kids. And the parents that were calling were those with limited English proficiency. And this resulted in them being a little afraid. I mean, it caused some fear in terms of them wanting to go in and enroll their kids. And so we said, no, let's work with the school districts, see what can happen. Compounding the situation is the fact that school districts vary. I mean, it varies by school district in terms of what they require for verification of residency. This bill addresses both of those problems. We think it provides clear direction for school districts with regards to what should be requested in verifying residency so that parents can enroll their kids in the schools and in the areas that they live in, neighborhoods that they live in. And we believe that this will then ensure equal opportunity and access to an education by all children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Madam Chair, Seth Bramble on behalf of the California Teachers Association. We weren't able to get our letter in, but CTA supports this bill, which will really help prevent discrimination and make sure that all of our students have access to our schools. So we urge your aye vote.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff Freitas with the California Federation of Teachers in late support of this bill. And wanted to point out the three bills today, and we probably should have came up on the 244, the Furutani bill, all trying to eliminate barriers for these students to get a proper education, most likely in the neighborhood schools, but they're all trying to eliminate these barriers. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Is there a motion on the bill? Moved by Ms. Carter. Is there a second? I will second the bill. Any questions from members? Mr. Norby.
Correct me if I'm wrong, current law gives school districts, and I think there are about 1,000 of them, not including the junior college districts, very wide latitude as to what residency papers they take. They can pretty much take anything and everything. So if that's the case, I'm not sure what problem this addresses. I know there's some basic aid districts. I know there's been a controversy in Beverly Hills, for example. A lot of out-of-area kids are going to school there, and since they're not getting ADA, they're losing money, and they're going through that. Maybe that is related to this, but until I see a clear need for this, I hesitate to vote for it, Madam Chair, and so that's a statement, but the author can certainly respond to it.
Currently, there is a law that says your parent or guardian have to live within the district, but then the accepted verification of that is far from uniform. And in one case I can think of, the Evergreen School District actually went way beyond what the requirements were, basic requirements were, to where it was almost painfully laughable that obviously people from certain backgrounds and certain classes would never be able to produce those kind of documents. And so this at least would add a uniform guidelines to what a school district can accept without any duplicity or hidden agendas. So that's my response. If you have
Mr. Nastand, go ahead.
And the other is some of the documentation that was being required was showing evidence of someone being a citizen, and that's not acceptable by current law.
Mr. Nasande.
Yeah, well, you just said that's not acceptable by current law, so I'm not hearing specifically what were the hurdles to get them into school that was the problem. You just said they're requiring citizenship, which is not allowed by law, so we'll take that one off the table. So what are the other specific documentations that a school district had required for them to show that they could not produce?
My understanding is they can't require, like, showing a current passport. That's not necessarily required.
No, what was the hurdle that maybe Mr. Amiano you said that a particular school district put up some hurdles, but I didn't hear what the documentation was that they were requiring.
As I understand from Evergreen, it was a passport, and there are also some other verifications, credit ratings. You know, a lot of people don't have credit cards, things of that nature.
In your analysis on page 3 gives an example of what's been required by Alcalanes Union High School. So a parent there had to provide documentation. The committee analysis
is
the committee analysis
is for all members of the committee. We don't have access to your analysis.
Well, I'll be happy to give it to you.
Thank you very much.
So the parent has to provide a documentation from each of the group that's listed here. In the first group, it's a current passport, current driver license with a vehicle registration, current California ID, current military ID.
It's one of those, I would assume, is choosing one of those, correct?
Pardon me?
Is it choosing one of those, or all those are required?
Choosing one of those.
Choosing one.
But then you have to have 3 forms of residency verification.
In addition to one of the forms in Group 2 and one of the forms in Group 3. So, you know, we believe that goes beyond what's the Department of Education has provided in their legal opinion in terms of what's required for showing residency verification.
So are you mandating this to local school districts in that they take this policy?
This bill would provide clear guidance and develop a uniform list of documentation that all school districts would be able to use.
Is that a yes? It would be a mandate?
Yes. Well, it would be
It would be the law if the governor signs it. And it's a requirement, yeah.
Okay, so it is a mandate bill then.
Well, it's already, I mean, if you're going to quantify
Your
it as a
mandate, my
there's
requirement.
already mandated that you have to show proof of residency in some way, shape, or form. I think this bill is just trying
That's a
to
good
add
point, yeah, and this is a
some other-
requirement for the mandate.
some other identification options. It is, my staff is telling me it is not a reimbursable mandate.
Right. And the issue does deal with the immigration status. School districts should not be required or not required to ask for documentation that shows evidence of one's immigrant status.
Well, I think as you stated, current law does not allow them to do that, so that would be duplicative of that current law.
But this does. What's required, what this Union High School is requiring would do that.
Well, I'm sorry, I thought you said that current law, it says you cannot check their residency, their citizenship, in order to allow them into school. Did you say that earlier?
Right. Federal law does not require showing of immigrant status in order to attend
Does
public
not
schools.
require, does not allow you to ask for it.
I'm Liz Guillen with Public Advocates. Federal law allows undocumented students to attend public schools. And because of that, the state has developed a policy of not requiring documents that would chill the right of these students and their families for them to come to school. So no, it is not required. And in requiring a document that suggests that the school district is asking about your immigration status, that's chilling their right to be in public school. And that's the reason why it's in the state's interest to make uniform a policy of asking for documents that makes very clear that as long as you're meeting our state law of being a resident, you're okay to enroll. And to not condone identification that suggests that you wouldn't be allowed to enroll, or that we're looking to check to see if you're doing something that you shouldn't be, and we're going to call the police on you or whatever. So I think that's really the point.
I just don't think that happens, though. We all know illegal immigrants go to school in California. I mean, that's just a fact. I don't think they're calling the INS on kids at school. I mean, I've not heard of that happening.
But there are instances.
There are, yeah.
It's happening.
It has happened. And here in Alcanus, particularly came to light, but there's more cases of that. There were principals who were denying certain programs to kids based on not having documentation, even though it was wrong, and even though the state does not sanction that. There's no uniform requirements. So it does say, not literally, but it says to a school district, you can do what you want to, particularly if you want to keep your school district in a certain manner, in a certain way, available for just certain kinds of people, not just undocumented. Special ed comes to mind. It's an unpleasant thing, but it happens. And we're trying to minimize that with this legislation.
I think the other thing that happens in practicality, too, is that a school district accepts the children, but then there are better schools in a district perceived to be better schools than other schools. And I think sometimes there is a district may indeed try to force kids to go to certain schools, not force, but through this documentation and so forth, say they need to go to this school versus the school and in the neighborhood of which they actually live in and have the right to go to. And again, this is local district policies. This is not state policies, but I've seen it in my school district when I was a school board member, a tendency to try to gear kids towards certain schools as opposed to others, rather than actually utilizing, where they live as a place of where that they should go to their neighborhood school.
What was the purpose of why they were doing that? The school administration was doing that?
I think that in the case of the school district that I came from, there was a sort of a greater demand on a particular school. And so they thought, well, with families that might have language issues and others, and I'm not trying to cast blame on anyone, but if they had a rule about the documentation and if it wasn't there, then they would say, there's no proof, you must go to this school. And it might not be, from the perception of others, the most desirable school to go to, but being geared to go to a particular school. So again, I don't want to cast dispersion or say that anyone was.
Well, they may have just been trying to balance out the neighboring schools with the population, I would guess. I mean,
perhaps.
I wouldn't assume any nefarious actions on your school board. All right, thank you.
Mr. Norby. Mr. Norby, we've already made one comment, though, so let's just keep it brief. We want to move on.
Well, I'm sure we do, but we did spend about over an hour on subjects which aren't directly under our control, and this is something that is, and it's pretty important. I had a question about the Acalanes Union High School. I presume it's a basic aid district, so it has a motive to keep kids out, because most schools want more kids because they get ADA. Do you know the answer to that?
I have no idea.
We don't believe it to be. All right, we have Mr. Rambula.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this bill is helpful in clearing up some confusion that may exist in the eyes of some school districts. The Acalanes Union High School, for example, requires documentation that may not be available to families. And I think the fundamental issue here is whether the parents reside in the district, not whether they can show a passport or a driver's license or a military ID. And to the extent that some districts are requiring documentation from each of the groups that's mentioned in our analysis, someone may not have renter's insurance, someone may not have a current property tax bill, but the real issue is, are they a resident of the district? And so to the extent that this bill clarifies what is required to establish residency, I think it will help clear up some of the confusion. And for that reason, I will be supporting the bill. Districts can still have the option of establishing that someone is not residing in the district, and so they have some alternatives available to them. but I don't think it's appropriate for school districts to put unreasonable documentation requirements in order to establish that they happen to live in the district.
Thank you, Mr. Arambula.
Have the school districts weighed in on this?
They haven't contacted you?
No, San Francisco has, and I imagine through the teachers union that they represent some parts of the school
I mean,
district.
I think like any bill, everybody's had the opportunity to weigh in. They may have chosen not to.
I'm just wondering if they'd contacted you either way. Okay.
Thank you. There's been a motion by Ms. Carter, and I seconded the bill. The motion is do pass as amended. Mr. Amiano, do you want to make any closing remarks?
I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Nastandy? No. Nastandy, no. Amiano?
Aye.
Amiano, aye. Arambula? Arambula, aye. Carter? Carter, aye. Ing? Ing, aye. Miller? Norby? Norby not voting. Torlakson? Torlakson, aye. It has 6 votes.
6 votes. Your bill is out, and we will move on to AB 1982, which is item 5.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and members. This is AB 1982. This bill enacts a cap on the number of charter schools while also providing some accountability to charter schools. Specifically, this bill creates a cap of 1,450 for the number of charter schools that may be authorized in California, provides some rules and guidelines to prevent nepotism in charter schools, adjust the responsibility of the governing board of the school district in the authorizing process, and request a report by the Legislative Analyst Office on the effectiveness of charter schools. Charter schools should be incubators of pedagogical ideas. They should represent their academic goals and philosophy through their petition and then be given some flexibility from the normal rules within the Education Code to achieve these goals. If these ideas are fruitful, then the state can attempt to replicate the ideas within the regular schools, but this has not been the practice in California. Charter schools should be accessible to all students and shouldn't be allowed to turn any student away or expel them for reasons that a public school cannot expel students. They should not be exempted from public school employment practices. They should be financially responsible and transparent, and with their flexibility from certain statutes, they should be held to tougher accountability standards. The bill primarily puts a cap on the number of charter schools and ends the unlimited growth that charter schools currently enjoy with a lack of true accountability. This bill will cap the number of charter schools at 1,450, which is above the 10% of the number of schools in the state that the U.S. Department of Education claims is the number needed for educational reform. This cap, in terms of percentages, is higher than 7 of the 16 finalists for Race to the Top grant, including Tennessee, one of the 2 states that actually received the funds from Race to the Top. Tennessee's cap on charter schools is about 5%. This bill provides a cap that is reasonable and makes changes to charter school laws that take the first step in making them accountable to students, parents, and the public. The bill is sponsored by the California Federation of Teachers and supported by the California Labor Federation and California School Employees Association. Today, I have a number of witnesses to speak in support.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff Freitas with the California Federation of Teachers, and we're proud to sponsor AB 1982, which provides additional checks and balances to charter schools and some accountability pieces to charter schools. Some advocates or proponents of this bill would say that it would limit the high-quality charter schools that were out there or any additional high-quality charter schools. I passed out a graph. The staff did a great analysis with a graph inside. That graph in your report just speaks to the number of schools that have been given numbers. There's a charter number that's given to everybody that has a petition that's approved. Doesn't mean that they're actually authorized or active at the time. So I took the same data and created a new graph to show the actual growth over time of charter schools, and it's been pretty consistent. You can see a linear growth over time, but that's with previous laws. There are current laws that are in place that we've recently passed in terms of the persistently lowest achieving schools, or because of No Child Left Behind, that might be changing some of that growth. It doesn't mean it's going to be accelerating any faster than or growing any faster than what's already on that graph, but there's a report that occurred in 2004, and that report doesn't reflect these new laws. And so what we're asking is to put a cap in place, 1450, to have and to analyze what these new laws will do to these charter schools, and to have a report put out by the LAO, which would be different, under different rules, under different guidelines, that was done in 2004. With that, we ask for your aye vote.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Seth Bramble on behalf of the California Teachers Association. Recent studies, including the Stanford study of last year, I think point to the fact that charters have yet to truly realize their goals. This set of measures, which in part focuses on increasing accountability, will provide more data. More data is always helpful in the accountability process. To have the LAO also do, some data piece on the effectiveness of charters will only help us make charter schools accountable to students, parents, and to the public. In addition, CTA believes charter schools must be free from conflict of interest in terms of both their approval and their operations. So for those reasons, CTA strongly supports this bill.
Thank you. Next witness.
Madam Chair and members, Brian Rivas on behalf of the California School Boards Association. Really just want to echo what my colleagues have said. When it comes to research that's been done on charter schools, I'm unaware of any research, particularly with regard to similar student populations, that indicates that charters are doing better than the traditional publics. So we like this bill because we think that it says let's be cautious about how we grow them in California, and at the same time let's apply some what we consider to be common sense safeguards against conflict of interest. So for those reasons, we're in support.
Thank you. And will the rest of the witnesses state your name, organization, and your position? Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Jeremy Smith on behalf of the California Labor Federation, also in support.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. Joshua Golko with the California School Employees Association, also in support.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Or witnesses in between? Or witnesses in opposition?
This is not a murky position. No, but it is an oppose unless amended. So there's a bit of a variation. Madam Chair and members, Rand Martin on behalf of the California Charter Schools Association. I do have to say I'm a little perplexed because the testimony I heard today was about a bunch of things that are not in this bill. There's certainly things we have talked about in this committee, especially accountability. And we're certainly looking forward to working with you on that in terms of your bill and conflict of interest as well in your other bill that's sitting in the Senate. And I'm not sure what this bill has to do with that. But I will say on the issues that the bill does address, there are two issues in it that we have no problem with. The study that the Assemblyman recommends, we're certainly very supportive of LAO and anybody else doing a study that would shed additional light on charter schools and help us all make them better. Number two, we actually have no problem with the intent behind the language of controlling who's employed and who does the employing. In fact, we carried a bill 2 years ago that attempted to do that, a bill by Assemblymember Garcia that would have constrained who could be hired. So we're certainly open to that. We think there needs to be some flexibility. Our bill suggested that a decision about employment could be made if it was approved by the Charter's Board of Directors. So there was some third party that was looking at it that would allow the employment or other employee action to be taken. We are concerned about the cap, obviously. We're not sure that the cap itself provides any practical purpose, except according to your consultant's analysis, in 2016, we would hit a firm cap and we would not be allowed to grow any further. We don't think that serves a purpose. The objective that's served is the accountability objective. It doesn't matter whether we have 1,450 or 5,000 charter schools, as long as we are comfortable that they are accountable and they're doing a good job. So we think that's where the effort should be placed and not on an arbitrary cap of 1,450 or whatever. We're also concerned, and I know there was some suggestions in the analysis, and I'm not sure whether the Assemblyman is taking any of these amendments as recommended, but we're very concerned about switching the presumption in terms of the approval process. Currently, there is a presumption in the law that if you unless you don't meet certain things, that you will be authorized. This would switch that so that we have to prove that we deserve to have the charter petition approved. The law was written specifically the way it was in order to respond to the inherent conflict of interest of the authorizer being the entity that's going to potentially lose schools as it moves into a charter school, so that they couldn't just shut down every petition that's put before them. They would have to. There's a hurdle that the authorizer has to reach in order to say no to a charter school. We think that's a very appropriate hurdle. It does level the playing field for the charter petitioner, and we would like to see that remain in the current law as it's currently written. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And we have accepted all the amendments. I'm sorry, we didn't relay that to you.
That's very helpful, and we're still opposed on the issues that still remain, but it is a much less opposable bill.
Any other witnesses in opposition? Any other witnesses in opposition? Questions, comments from members? Mr. Nastande.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with what Mr. Martin said. I think we should focus on accountability, and that should be very important to measure then and have that accountability and as we go forward in improving more charter schools. But I don't get the point, though, of the cap on charter schools and what that has to do with the accountability factor. I guess I'm reiterating his points. But I don't get the opposition to charter schools in general when President Obama has made this a center point of his education policy to lift all caps on charter schools. Why is it that in California our institutions say, not a good idea? Does the president just not know what he's talking about on this, or what's...
Wouldn't go that far, but I would speak to loyal opposition, and there's quite a few practices currently in federal law that I'd like to see the president address. And like I say, I'm waiting by the phone, so he can call me. I can give him my 2 cents.
If the president is listening,
if he's listening, move this bill. So I do have a disagreement there on that particular policy.
Mr. Norby.
If McDonald's came to us and wanted a cap on In-N-Out Burger franchises, or the U.S. Post Office wanted a cap on FedEx outlets, it would be obvious what their motivations are, and I think it's obvious what the motivations are here as well for those that oppose charter schools, and I don't support a cap.
Thank you. Mr. Arambila.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If this bill was only about anti-nepotism, I would readily support it. But I don't believe we need a cap. I don't see the value in a cap. I don't see why we even should be talking about a cap. We should be talking about how to strengthen the non-charter public schools so that parents don't feel that they need to look elsewhere. I also don't see that we need to change the burden of proof from the governing body showing why it denied a petition to, as the bill says, the petitioner having to meet all requirements or be denied with no written explanation. But more than just the technical aspects or the language in the bill, I am troubled by efforts to limit alternatives to parents. Many of the same organizations that spoke in favor of the bill have opposed charters and have opposed accountability measures. I think fundamentally what we should be doing is allowing parents to have an opt-out, an alternative, and in the meantime working to improve the public schools with accountability measures for the non-charter public schools that are meaningful. It's kind of like if you're in a race, if you're competing with somebody, you can either get better, you can train harder, you can accept the challenge and do what it takes to be more competitive, or you can, the Tonya Harding school of
Ouch. I felt that one.
Well, I think rather than bringing the competition down, we should be focusing on strengthening and being willing to compete. Parents will choose whatever option they think is most advantageous to their children. And I'm coming from an area where there is a disproportionate number of failing schools, where a school district has 99% of its students in the bottom decile. And yet, when a charter school was being proposed that might allow some of those students to go there, folks opposed it, including folks, the organizations that were here. So I don't want my folks kept captive. I don't want my folks to be held hostage. And I think that this bill is moving in the wrong direction, and I regretfully will not be able to support.
Any other comments or questions? Is there a motion on Mr. Amiano's bill? Moved by Mr. Torlakson, seconded by Mr. Ng. Any other questions or comments? Just for clarification, Mr. Amiano, you've accepted all the committee amendments.
Yes.
And the motion is due pass as amended. And Secretary, call the roll.
Could I close, please?
Oh. I'm so sorry.
That's fine.
Yes, you may.
I take all the comments to heart. I think we all have the same goal. Kids, with all due respect, are not hamburgers, and we want them to have the best education and the most level playing field. And there is mutual suspicion on both sides of the charter school issue. I admit to that. I do think that the cap that we put on is not just a gratuitous cap. Studies have shown that when you limit the number of authorizations, you up the quality because people take it more seriously, and you produce a more effective program rather than and I know this doesn't happen very often, but let's just have a charter school for the sake of having a charter school. I don't think any of us would agree with that. So additionally, I think we have to focus on neighborhood schools and making sure we can provide safe schools in the areas where children live, and a limit would also put pressure on the idea that charter schools should be serving the community and neighborhoods in which they reside and not necessarily be open enrollment or cherry pick. So I would respectfully ask, even with our differences, and someday they all may be resolved, I certainly hope so. Maybe I will have that beer with President Obama sometime or other. But in the meantime, I would ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Amiano. I apologize for skipping right over an important clause. So with that, I will ask the Secretary to call the roll.
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Nastandi? No. Nastandi, no. Amiano?
Aye.
Amiano, aye. Arambula? Arambula, no. Carter? Carter, aye. Ng? Ng, aye. Miller? Miller, no. Norby? No. Norby, no. Torlakson? Aye. Torlakson, aye. It has 5 votes.
5 votes. Your bill is out. And now, Mr. Torlakson, AB 1716, Item 1. Welcome, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill has to do with the developer fees related to school housing, school construction. The existing law authorizes school districts to levy development fees in order to finance the construction of new school facilities. Home builders, however, often front 100% of the construction costs until the district receives an apportionment from the state allocation board. We, through this measure, say that interest should be paid on that money when it's reimbursed back to the home builder. Urge an aye vote.
Madam Chair, members, Richard Lyon on behalf of the California Building Industry Association. About 12 years ago, Assembly Member Torlakson and I were part of a group that put together what became the School Facility Financing Act, and it was cutting edge then, and it has been a model of good public-private partner infrastructure program. The way school facilities are financed in the new growth areas, the state plays a portion of constructing the facility, with the other portion coming from local sources, including builder fees. And as Mr. Torlakson said, situations arise where builders will be asked to put up 100% of the financing. Current law allows for the district and the builder to engage in a reimbursement agreement. The district will go to the state allocation board. They'll get a portion of the funding that they are eligible for and then reimburse that back. And this simply says that any interest that would accrue between the time that the board releases the funds to the district and it goes back to the builder, also included in that reimbursement. Very simple bill. We encourage your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Is there a motion on the bill? Moved by Ms. Carter, seconded by Mr. Nastande. Questions, comments? Mr. Arambula.
Assemblymember Torlakson, the bill, according to the analysis, seeks to codify a ruling from Florida. Is there pending litigation, or what is the urgency to codify an out-of-state ruling that, at least on its face, seems to have dissimilar effects?
Well, first, I just think it makes it more clear and gets to the point faster for the builders, also knowing up front that they're going to get the financing costs back.
And Mr. Arambula, I would say that the bill doesn't really codify a court case. It simply takes a court case, in this case a U.S. Supreme Court case that determined the basic rule of financing, and that is that the interest follows the principal, and applies it simply to the situation in California. So there's no intent here to codify a court case. The court case simply acts as a legal ruling that this is a basic rule of finance, and we apply that in this particular situation.
Then I stand corrected. I just wanted to point out the analysis says, according to the author, this bill codifies the ruling. So perhaps I'm mistaken, but that's the only question I had.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I know that I just wanted to say that I know that this bill is intended to kind of address the issue of level 3 developer fees, and I'm certainly supportive of the bill as presented, but as you proceed, and if there are any significant changes, we certainly reserve the right to ask the bill to come back to committee. The bill was moved by Ms. Carter and seconded by Mr. Nastande, and the motion is due pass. Would you like to close?
Virgin, I vote. Thank you.
Secretary, call the roll.
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Nastande? Aye. Nastande, aye. Amiano? Aye. Amiano, aye. Arambula? Arambula, no. Carter? Carter, aye. Ing? Aye. Ing, aye. Miller? Aye. Miller, aye. Norby? Aye. Norby, aye. Torlakson?
Aye.
Torlakson, aye. So it's 8-1.
That's 8-1. Your bill is out, and we move to item number 10, AJR 39.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. This bill gets to the issue of the Common Core standards and whether there should be a simple focus, which I believe personally is too narrow, and hearing across California concern that our school curriculum has gotten so focused simply on mathematics and language arts that it's put a lot of other parts of what we used to call a comprehensive education on the sidelines. This bill, as a resolution, urges the development of Common Core standards beyond those two which have just emerged from the CC, from the Common Core Standards Initiative, which is a combination of the Association of Governors nationwide and the Association of Chief Education Officers. So they've put forward their plans for mathematics and language arts. We call, in this measure, to also put forward national standards in social science and science. We additionally call for the consideration of common standards in the future, additionally for foreign language, arts, physical education, career technical education. But we believe that this is essential for a more well-rounded, comprehensive education that prepares our young people for the work world and for their citizenship and participation in our democracy. We have several witnesses in favor.
Would move the bill, Madam Chair.
Bill's been moved, seconded by Mr. Miller. Close.
Just really quickly, if we could, Madam Chair, Fred Jones on behalf of the California Council for the Solstice. That's right, you had a sidebar. And since we're moving quickly, I'll just say we're in strong support as sponsors of the bill.
Great. Any other witnesses in support?
Yes, Christine Bertrand with California Science Teachers Association. We're very pleased to co-sponsor this bill and urge your support.
Witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, a bill's been moved and seconded. Secretary, please call the roll.
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Nastandy? Aye. Nastandy, aye. Amiano? Aye. Amiano, aye. Arambula? Aye. Arambula, aye. Carter? Carter, aye. Ing? Aye. Ing, aye. Miller? Aye. Miller, aye. Norby? Aye. Norby, aye. Torlakson?
Aye.
Torlakson, aye.
Okay, that bill is out. And we have, before we conclude our business, we have one bill on call, and that was item 7, AB 2412.
I haven't done the consent calendar either.
Oh, okay. I forgot that this meeting was going to be so easy. I'm forgetting all the things that I need to do. So the items on consent calendar, which is item 2, AB 1742 by Mr. Cotto, do pass, and item 9, AB 2694 by Mr. Blumenfield, do pass as amended. So if we could have a motion on the consent by Mr. Arambula, seconded by Mr. Miller. Secretary, call the roll.
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Nastandy? Amiano? Aye. Amiano, aye. Arambula? Arambula, aye. Carter? Carter, aye. Ing? Ing, aye. Miller? Miller, aye. Norby? Norby, aye. Torlakson? Torlakson, aye. So it's out.
The consent calendar is out, and now we will go to the one bill on call, which is item 7, AB 2412 by Mr. Tran. The do pass as amended, and if you will call the absent members.
Yes. Ing?
Item number 7, AB 2412 by Mr. Tran.
And Miller? Miller, aye. Has 5 votes.
It has 5 votes. Item 7, AB 2412 by Mr. Tran is out. Yes, I think we have concluded the business. Anybody who needs to add on can add on. Are we clear to adjourn? So this meeting is adjourned.